For the longest time, Path of Exile's endgame only consisted of maps and act boss runs. On March 5th, 2014, 5 months after Path of Exile's official launch, the at the time infantile action role-playing game received its first endgame expansion with patch 1.1, Sacrifice of the Vaal, and that changed forever. Not only did the update introduce the formidable Queen Atziri pinnacle boss to PoE, it brought strong boxes, invasion bosses, Vaal side areas, and much more. It was a wild time for PoE players. Let's investigate it. In the lead up to Path of Exile's largest expansion to date, Path of Exile 2, we are analyzing every major update to the game. Welcome to the PoE 1 Flashback series. This episode explores Path of Exile 1.1, Sacrifice of the Vaal. Let's get corrupted. Absolutely everything in Sacrifice of the Vaal revolved around the Vaal culture, their corruption of certain valuable items like virtue gems, and their arrogant, self-absorbed ruler, Queen Atziri. The Vaal were a group of people who ruled Rayclast, the continent most of PoE takes place on, in the distant past for hundreds of years. They were obsessed with blood, sacrifices, and virtue gems, the canonical name for skill and support gems in Path of Exile. Like us exiles in the present, they wielded gems to grant themselves immense power. Unlike us, they inserted these gems into their bodies and were bloody obsessed with them. We of course innovated and decided to socket them in our equipment. However, the Vaal created new and interesting innovations concerning virtue gems, which we eventually discover in Path of Exile in this patch. They were called Vaal skill gems. As an entirely new type of gem, Vaal skill gems could not be activated at any time. Instead, they required exiles to perform the oh-so-indecent act of slaughtering enemies, collecting their souls inside said gems, and unleashing them alongside a burst of insanity from the gems, activating a special Vaal skill. Some were definitely more powerful than others, and new Vaal skill gems filtered into the game throughout the Sacrifice of the Vaal era and beyond, with a host of new Vaal skills actually being added in the game's current-day expansion, 3.21. Examples include Vaal Cyclone, which pulled all enemies into your character, Vaal Ice Nova, which repeated its effect from every enemy it hit up to 5 times, and Vaal Immortal Call, which made your character invulnerable for a very short amount of time, depending on how many endurance charges you expended upon its use. Vaal skill gems and the keys to Queen Atziri sacrificial fragments were found in Vaal side areas. As you ventured through Rayclast, you would occasionally stumble upon exhilarating Vaal-influenced secret areas, distinguished by their frightening, pulsating hearts and swirling ribbons of blood. These corrupted domains possessed awe-inspiring magical properties akin to endgame maps, wildly amplifying their challenge. Plus, each boasted a gruesomely compelling name based on which area they were found in. The Prisoner's Gate hid the remote gulch, the slums the quarantined quarters, and the docks the stagnant canal. Nestled at the end of each Vaal side area awaited a formidable boss guarding a treasure chest called a Vaal vessel that guaranteed the acquisition of a Vaal skill gem or Vaal sacrificial fragment. All these bosses were new additions to Path of Exile, twisting novel abilities with existing monsters. Most were quite deadly, like Quetzalcoatl, a unique dust scrabbler who created lightning storms and fired a set of 6 electrocuting, piercing projectiles at exiles when hit. As these are still in the game, I have a personal favorite frustrating boss, Thornrunner, a spine serpent with a proximity shield and extreme speed. Proximity shield is a mob that spawns a bubble around the host creature, requiring exiles to be in melee range to hit it. With Thornrunner sprinting around and thrusting tons of projectiles, this is a fun fight to hate, unlike the battle we're about to discuss. As promised by the developers, Path of Exile's premier post-launch expansion introduced the game's first pinnacle boss, Queen Atziri, the Vaal despot with 4 breasts and a passion for her limitless beauty. Said to be the source of the cataclysm that wiped out millions upon millions of people in the ancient past and caused the collapse of her entire civilization overnight, Queen Atziri was accessing the current-day Rayclast through some twisted nightmare realm. Her influence changed the landscape around the continent, corrupting it with everything we just discussed. Us exiles could collect 2 sets of 4 special fragments, arrange them properly in the map device, and summon 6 portals to her nightmare realm. The first set was for normal Atziri and found in Vaal side areas. The second set was to face Uber Atziri and was found by killing regular Atziri herself. Once inside her realm, we faced a gauntlet of Vaal foes to reach her. Vessels of the Vaal, a trio of unique Vaal zealots, and a horde of Vaal fanatics. At the end of this bloody dungeon, either the alluring abyss or the apex of sacrifice awaited Queen Atziri. In Sacrifice of the Vaal, The first 50 players who killed Queen Atziri on either league would receive an exclusive helmet MTX effect, Ritual Horns. This was PoE's first true boss rush race, and it was a level playing field. No one knew what Queen Atziri's fight would entail, but with the gift of retrospect, we do. We're going to give the Queen her time in the spotlight, a prominent place in front of the mirror into PoE's distant past. Her fight was split into 3 prominent phases, each of them repeating multiple times at 75, 50, and 25% health. Phase 1 was known as Atziri's normal phase. Importantly, Atziri had built-in damage reflection during this phase, meaning if you dealt direct damage to her, you needed a way to mitigate that reflection, or you'd almost instantly down yourself. She also reflected all curses. Otherwise, during this phase, Atziri chucked an arc of spears that applied bleeding, channeled a huge deadly Flameblast, or randomly placed a chain of storm calls around the area. As her health lowered, she gained access to 2 empowered versions of the latter 2 abilities. All of these attacks were faster in the Uber version of the fight. Phase 2, called Atziri's Ad Phase, was simple. Atziri became immune to damage, spawned ads around her who, if they reached her, healed her. This phase allowed players a chance to chill and refill their character's flask charges. Phase 3, regarded as Atziri's split phase, could only happen once at each health interval and immediately followed the Ad Phase. Quickly, Atziri split herself into 4 copies, each with a unique ability. To finish the phase, one of the 4 copies had to be defeated to damage the true Atziri once more. Spear Atziri thrust a single, slow projectile at exiles. Fire Atziri spawned a Flameblast at the exile's current position. Lightning Atziri brought forth more storm calls, and Mirror Atziri reflected 100% of physical and elemental damage when hit. Once split phase finished, Atziri would move back to normal phase and repeat the cycle until killed. Upon defeating Atziri, exiles could find special unique items such as Atziri's Promise, Atziri's Disfavor, and Atziri's Acuity, or the Sacrificial Garb body armor base only found off the corpse of Queen Atziri. Atziri's Disfavor was one of a few items that could only drop from Uber Atziri. All were, and many still are, key items to use in character builds. Defeating Queen Atziri was the crowning achievement of a PoE player at the time. The race to kill her was exciting, and the first person to down her in Ambush League might surprise you. It was Mathel, the consistently chill, hardworking, and innovative PoE content creator. On the well-regarded Spectral Throw build of the time, the Queen was no match for him. It wouldn't be until a few expansions later that the Queen would be dethroned as the best boss in Path of Exile, but we'll get to that in good time in this series. Every RPG player loves chess, right? No, not those chess. These chess. 1.1's Softcore League placed a wide variety of interactable, modifiable chess called strongboxes across Path of Exile. Ambush League centered around the idea of risk versus reward. The new strongboxes were accompanied by guardian monsters that laid in wait, eager to ambush unsuspecting characters when the chests were clicked on and opened. To claim the juicy contents of the strongbox, the ambushing foes needed to all be slain. Exiles would wander to various strongboxes with magical, rare, or unique qualities. In the same vein as PoE's items, these formidable chests possessed various awesome mods. Prefixes altered the difficulty of the ambush, introducing additional monsters, springing traps, or affecting exiles in various ways. Consequently, suffixes enhanced the rewards obtained from the strongbox. If exiles desired a different set of mods, currency items like Chaos or Vaal Orbs, which we'll discuss soon, could be employed to reroll the mods entirely. Players could ascertain the rewards present within a strongbox by its appearance and name. An Arcanist strongbox contained currency that didn't affect item quality. A Cartographer's strongbox contained map items. A Gem Cutter strongbox contained gems, and so on and so forth. Around 0.6% of the time, a unique strongbox could spawn that contained a special set of rewards and encounter mechanics. For example, Calm's Cache guaranteed a single Calm unique item on its drop table. Like Rogue Exiles, Onslaught, Shrines, and Nemesis mods before it, Ambush League content was added to the core PoE game after its conclusion. Run concurrently beside Ambush League, Invasion was Sacrifice of the Vaals Hardcore League. This league was specifically crafted to test and push players and their characters to their absolute limits. In Invasion League, various areas of Rayclast harbored a significantly higher diversity of monsters, ensuring that players encountered unexpected and perilous invading creatures hailing from completely different areas or acts. Furthermore, each area harbored a distinct and cruel boss monster belonging to the invading creature faction, armed with potent combinations of skills designed to catch players off guard and, truly, send their characters to Standard League. Some of these doubled up as boss monsters in the newly added Vaal side areas too. As you ventured further and further into the depths of Path of Exile's Act difficulty levels, the range of monster types expanded, intensifying the invasion experience with every passing area. The invading bosses steadily acquired additional abilities, further augmenting the challenge they presented to players and their poor exiles. Special to both Invasion and Ambush was the introduction of 8 new quiver bases and 1 new ring base, the Unset Ring. Quivers, of course, could be equipped in a character's offhand slot if the character was wielding a bow. Unset rings had a single socket and could carry gems in said socket. Additionally, both leagues shared a set of 8 challenges. Whoever completed all 8 challenges was rewarded an exclusive Ambush and Invasion PoE t-shirt. Challenges included kill each of the following 36 invasion bosses and have these 44 specific Vaal items. In the end, only 14 players completed all 8 challenges. Absolutely wild compared to the current day PoE ones. Unfortunately, Invasion wasn't truly implemented into the core Path of Exile game after its end. Some of the invasion bosses were reused, and the mechanic does make an appearance very rarely, but it didn't become a part of the usual PoE experience, unlike this incredibly vital addition to the game we're talking about next. As Atziri's influence pervaded Rayclast, more and more exiles were tempted into using a new currency added in 1.1, Vaal Orbs. Like a jeweler's orb or a chaos orb, a Vaal Orb could be used on an item. However, when used on an item, it would corrupt it, rendering it unalterable. At first, the community didn't know exactly what Vaal Orbs could do, but they quickly discovered they could be used to completely ruin an item or turn it into the best piece of gear on their character. Corrupting items with sockets could turn sockets white, meaning any gem color could be placed in them. It could also add powerful implicit modifiers to items, increase gem levels to levels higher than 20, craft map items with 8 modifiers, or completely re-roll an item of any rarity into a randomized rare item, among other things. Beginning in Sacrifice of the Vaal, a new level of item power was possible. When someone believed they had the perfect item, picked up off the ground or meticulously crafted, they could risk it all and, as us exiles say, slam it with a Vaal Orb. Some of the most valuable items back then were corrupted uniques, with extremely positive implicits granted by a risky Vaal Orb slam. All the way back in Sacrifice of the Vaal thrived a classic, extremely simple to understand 2-skill build, Detonate Dead Flameblast Witch. Yep, it's time for a build highlight. I'm pulling from PoE forum user SVD's build guide from 2014. Shout out to them for the excellent rundown if they're still here. The Flameblast and Detonate Dead plus Desecrate combination was used to create an AoE burning damage build using the Elemental Proliferation support gem. The damage output proved to be excellent even without significant investment in damage-focused passive skill points, allowing for the allocation of most passives toward bolstering defenses. Both Flameblast and Detonate Dead were employed to address the weaknesses inherent in the other. Let's run down this build's use of Detonate Dead and why it worked. Detonate Dead boasted fast cast speed, delivered high initial damage and potent burn effects, was easy to aim, proved effective against necromancers, which were prominent enemies back then, had a low mana cost, performed well in a 4-link setup, required corpses for optimal usage, depended on desecrate charges when corpses were unavailable, and necessitated a minimum of 2 actions to execute, unfortunately. So those were the strengths and weaknesses of Detonate Dead. Now here are the strengths and weaknesses of Flameblast. The skill exhibited extremely high top-end damage, offered the highest ignite damage potential in the game, allowed for anticipation of powerful strikes with its build-up mechanic. It was ideal for boss encounters, strong boxes, charging enemies, etc. It enabled one-click activation against a single moving target, required no prep, was suitable for use while evading enemy attacks like in the Queen Atziri fight, synergized well with leech mechanics due to its exceptional single target damage. However, it had a slow build-up time for maximum damage output, incurred a high mana cost, and occasionally proved challenging to aim accurately. This build was widely regarded as one of the strongest options available in terms of clear speed and cost efficiency, while offering remarkable flexibility and viability in all areas of the game except PvP, which almost no one played. That's it. For all intents and purposes, this build was extremely viable in all forms of PoE's content back in Sacrifice of the Vaal. You might notice it wasn't too complicated either. Really, it just revolved around two skills, Detonate Dead and Flameblast. That's not the case in future Path of Exile builds, which are far more complex and have far more depth. I am not a build guy. I look at builds, I edit builds as I go through the game, but I don't really craft my own, at least not yet. We'll see if that changes in the future, but I do know in the next video, the build we'll be looking at is a little bit more complex, but we'll get to it in that video. Before we conclude this flashback of 1.1 with a dose of healthy PoE drama, let's explore all the relatively minor content that arrived alongside the big ticket pieces in Sacrifice of the Vaal, plus some vital fixes to new and existing slices of the game. Dozens of unique items received their own 3D art, letting characters style with items found in game. A ton of uniques were also added to the game. Plenty of monsters had greatly improved death animations, something the PoE trailer designer was quite pleased about. As mentioned before, shrines and nemesis modifiers were officially added to the core game. The marauder and duelist areas of the passive skill tree were also substantially reworked. 2 stone rings and jade and quartz flasks could now drop in all leagues, but increased item quantity support was removed from the game, a bummer to many. A few patches in, Grinding Gear Games rebalanced Vaal skill soul counts, which were initially balanced for merciless difficulty where there were more monsters. That was the highest difficulty level back then. Now, characters could actually readily access Vaal skills on normal and cruel difficulties. Checkpoints were added in non-hardcore leagues. You could now choose between reviving in town or at the last checkpoint in the area. In 1.1.3, Molten Strike, the infamously not buffed, strength skill gem, was added to PoE. This skill attacked a target with physical and fire damage, causing balls of molten magma to launch forth from your weapon as you swung. These exploded, causing AoE attack damage to enemies where they landed. Soon after, 1.1.5 added Ball Lightning, another iconic PoE skill. We couldn't conclude the video without a dollop of drama. Now could we? Well, judging by the barrage of huge, heavy-handed nerfs to the invasion bosses and massive increases to the spawn rate of Vaal side areas, players were upset to start Sacrifice of the Vaal. In multiple separate patches, the developers drastically decreased the difficulty and spawn rate of the most challenging and most unfair invasion bosses, sometimes completely revamping their skill set. I think players may have hated them. At the same time, they buffed the rate at which players would find the new Vaal-inspired content in the game, from the actual Vaal side areas to Vaal orbs and sacrificial fragments used to access Queen Atziri. Late into the expansion, the developers also added the ability to force a Vaal side area to spawn by placing a single sacrificial fragment into the map device in the Eternal Laboratory, ensuring players could always access these areas if they had the means to do so. This gives us a glimpse of the future. Many leagues required changes spawned by community outcries, not by unforeseen bugs. The developers always had a vision, especially in the case of Invasion League. Slaughter as many characters in potentially unfair ways as possible. The player base met that challenge with immense distaste. Regardless, at least with Sacrifice of the Vaal, the developers responded to player feedback by implementing changes. They listened to them, they improved the experience, and they learned for their next expansion. Right? Up next would be what the developers coined as the first major expansion to Path of Exile since its launch. As someone who was not around during its release, 1.2, branded as Forsaken Masters, appears insane. But what doesn't to us totally sane exiles? If you enjoyed this video, consider watching the videos on your screen right now and sharing them with your fellow totally sane exiles. Every minute you watch helps the channel grow. Huge shout out to my current channel members and patrons. Thank you so much for your support. You truly are the most unhinged among us all. If you would like to help support the growth of this channel, the links to both are in the description of this video. Ala Moana.